Our presentation today is the future of enterprise risk management using AI, and risk management landscape is actually changing. So we're seeing more and more that there's oversight, accountability, involvement, insight, data-driven ideas, things that we actually used to do for risk management. Now we're really trying to test things around that, what actually works, what doesn't work, and we realize increasingly that there's a need wherever there was like the need for oversight, where is the need for accountability, involvement, insight, data-driven ideas. We're really looking at it that say, okay, you know what, there's more and more the idea of introducing AI tied to it. So, your traditional view and, Chevron approach, who does it? Analyst, frontline staff, business stakeholder, risk analyst, risk manager, risk monitor, risk auditor, and your corporate board. These are all of the individuals who are involved in that entire risk activity. What do? They collect the data, articulate risk, resolve individual risk, ensure risk controls are in place. So this is really the management of risk. And the management of risk is exactly where AI is really coming into play. And a lot of the stuff that we see about loading data, controls, track risk, improve visualization, ensure data fidelity, monitor prioritization, risk resolution. A lot of these things are actually being delivered by AI. And whenever we talk about AI, the most important part that comes in is that 65% of enterprise report regular use of generative AI. 80% of, and here's the catch, 80% of enterprises are not seeing EBIT impact. So all this investment, and again, there's trillions of dollars of investment that is really going on, and the investment versus the actual business return, there's definitely a gap in that. I'm hoping at some point of time we're going to be able to bridge that gap. But until then, this is the kind of the state, and 40% of those enterprises actually have actual enterprise strategy. So this is like a graph, there's like huge investment going on, and this investment has like continuously expanded on an ongoing basis. So general business domains that we're seeing that AI is using, on the concern that is answered, energy consumption, stagnation of knowledge scale, performance issues, made up answers. But we're seeing that if we can allow easy governance, easy oversight, transparent conditioning data set, option, if we can actually have these available, then we can see that more and more there's likelihood that AI can be like gradually more adapted and more introduced. So for our case, we've used AI for building our own product, that's IRA, within this SysRisk product domain. So we literally, instead of saying, hey, let's just bolt it on, rather what we did was that how do we actually enable AI in all of those areas of risk management for a organization? And that's what we tried to do. This brings us to this slide. So this slide, we believe that if you're really looking at risk management from a capability perspective for your organization, you should be looking at risk governance and oversight, risk identification, risk assessment and analysis, risk treatment, control, operational resilience, third-party ecosystem of risk, technology data and cyber risk, risk data, analytics and AI risk technology integration. So if you look at all of these things, you'll see that there's parts that we found that you see that like AI really comes into it right away. And from a risk perspective within the areas of enterprise risk management, we realized that risk governance, oversight, risk identification, compliance, regulatory risk, all of these areas, they have some form of AI component that is actually required and pretty much requested by everybody. So from that perspective, we realized we asked some of our colleagues in the industry and also some of the business stakeholders, what are the things that we're really seeing with regards to like AI needs driving, and the answers were fairly common again and again, and that was to improve the quality, detect emerging risk, connect with risk controls, provide evidence-backed recommendations. And a lot of times they're doing just, here's chat GPT, here's my question, let me try to find the answer, let me try to plop it up, and here's my report. So a lot of those preliminary activities going on, and a lot of individuals are trying to test around manual efforts removal, and also and that's right, really all the way from actual individuals who are in the industry, where you are a junior risk analyst, all the way to senior execs. They're using AI towards really bring some form of efficiency, not necessarily augment it into activities and process flows, but rather enriching data, reports, information, because it really helps from those perspectives. So from that side, we're realizing that the AI and enterprise risk management and all of those areas that we can really bring in, it's really about risk identification, risk statement generation, risk classification, assessment, scoring, control recommendation, mapping, advisor, KRI generation, intelligence. So all of these areas that we've always felt that was the bread and butter of the world for an actual risk analyst, where they're actually really going into deep into asking questions and identifying trends and identifying actual risk, also from their own experience, and also sharing with what they have. So there is a gap in that, where AI has really filled in that information, but how that information is really filled in is our next graph, and that is the enterprise risk knowledge graph. And we're saying that your organizational knowledge graph should not be, here I'm coming in and AI really doesn't know something. I tried to provide some information, and it really gets all that data and information from elsewhere, not your own organization, but elsewhere. Or you're probably trying to like load a report and say, oh, by the way, could you tell me what the risk that we're actually facing? So those are not really, they're good, but they might be one of those that, oh, this actually really makes sense. But when we're using AI towards actually making decisions that might make or break your organization, that's where the issue really arises. So risk knowledge graph, we should look at strategy, objective, processes, assets, vendor, risk controls, KRIs. All of these, there's an actual flow, and this is really something that we are trying to deliver via our tool sets. So, and when we're actually really looking into AI tool sets, we realize that we should use AI to answer some of the things, not necessarily that it can be like answered the best way, but rather, here's my entire body of knowledge, here's my entire body of risk, etc. So what are the fastest growing risks that the organization is facing, and that we need to really resolve? Which risks have ineffective or overdue controls? How are the different vendors contribute? So it's not really like questions like, oh, I've got this risk and this is the control, could you tell me what the risk resolution should be? Rather, it's really insightful conditioning of the actual question that you have for your organization, trying to really find out what are the items that will really make us better as an organization. So those are the things that we should really start answering. And in order to answer those things, you really need to build out your own AI platform, or I should say platform, rather your AI tool sets that lives within a ecosystem that is fully aware of your organization and aware of the documents, the management processes, etc., as opposed to, hey, I've got this question, give me this answer, or I've got this data, I'm trying to mine this data and ensure that this data flows into creating a new controls or review those controls. So there's a gap in that. There's one thing that is called, your tactical information, and gathering that information and providing you with a insight that is like available in the global knowledge base. Or there's the idea of you can actually have your own organizational data, organizational information, and use it towards building a model that drives your AI dominance around the board with your organization and with your competitors. So here's a skeleton architecture. So the ERM application or system of records contains risk, controls, incidents, audits, vendors, treatments. And use the mouse here, guys. So this is that layered information or your system of records that you have, and then this data really comes into, say, AI gateway, and that allows, has all the guardrails and information there. So you have RAG, ML analytics, AI agents, and that allows, AI policy engine that provides, data policy approval, guardrails, approved AI models, AI recommendation store, ERM workflow, and ultimately an audit trail is present. So this would be a architecture that we can, and that we use. And I'm an architect that actually focuses on a lot of these risk areas. So the type of application that we'll be looking at is you need your existing ERM application to aggregate that data. Your data should not live in isolation, or your analysts should not ask and answer questions via chatbots or get information that supports their own mandate for a particular risk or a particular item, but that doesn't allow you to ask the questions, the peering questions that you need to be answered for your organization to move forward. And that is the objective for risk management, where what are the issues that we have today that are actually preventing us from growing and moving forward. So I leave this with you. So it's as I said, it's not about ChatGPT or Claude and just getting your quick questions and answers, etc. So that this really comes into the AI gateway. So we need to have a AI gateway enabled and ensure that you are able to get the data, get the right information. It's a system, and it's not about so large organizations, and again, Microsoft, or OpenAI, Anthropic, they'll say, yes, you can use our system towards building new tools, but it's still like utilizing their own data, their own information, and the tokens that we actually get charged. But this is really a different approach that we're trying to build out. Where instead of a lot of the data residing straight into these large organizations, you're really carving out this space where you have your own data and you're utilizing that data towards creating insights and views for your own organization, all the while the large language models are actually being used towards creating the paragraphs of information. So they thread together sentences that are meaningful, but the data and the insight that has to be crunched in-house, and you're not looking at a $1 trillion investment for that. There are lots of great models that can be utilized and hosted on your own prem towards building those models for your own organization. So AI functionality, risk statement generator, risk classification, risk assessment, control recommendation, all of these are actually, suggested, available, but they all need a level of human authority or human engagement, and this is where that governance piece comes into play, and this needs to be established when you're actually doing AI or delivering upon AI. This is the next thing, that one of the things that we really need to do. So you need to have a generative AI competency. It's not about just one piece of model or your own area that you're trying to do. So there's generative AI or LLM, there's some machine learning, there are AI agents. You might have your own model that says, okay, these are all of my finance data. I've actually modeled it, and for every input or every series of input, I know here's the type of output that we get, and here's our own model that you actually built out. And then there's also the RAG, or the retrieval augmented generation, where you're storing your files, and using those files, it actually provides the risk list, so the taxonomy, controls, policies. And we're really trying to say that you should have your own model. You should really have your RAG already established, so that way you can utilize LLMs towards building the paragraphs, building the responses that you're really looking at. So that's what really the objective should be. So finally, I want to add the idea of human accountability. You cannot, you're dealing with risk, and yet suddenly you're actually introducing new risk. Okay, so we really need to think back at that. We are trying to resolve risk, yet you're utilizing AI. We're introducing new risk, but what we're assuming is we're going to get speed, and we're definitely getting speed, but the insight and the insight of actual risk resolution, which is really the objective, and the other area of actually effective decision making, understanding what their strategic directions, goals, or the gaps. So that's where I believe that the human being really needs to be involved and intervene for the organization itself. So you will have your finding, you'll have your understanding. So there might be a speed that we're now able to respond or understand the risk, but ultimately the resolution tied to it, or what action needs to be delivered upon, it still should be on the human hands, and that's where the human accountability is very critical. So humans should not we should definitely not accept the risk that AI has ultimately identified, unless it's actually something that is completely out of the blue. We really need to understand what those risks are. AI should not independently close a significant risk, and a lot of individuals are. So from architecture side, they said, well, can we actually start closing these risks from technology, and we can actually really leverage AI for that, because AI can just understand which is true risk and not, or which has been resolved. But I do believe that there's a human intervention that is really required right there, where the human being says, you know what, this is the risk that needs to be closed, or this is the risk that cannot be closed, etc. So that's where I say that all these models and everything, then I want to talk about models. So you build your framework and you've, built all of the components and all the pieces together, and you have this, AI, environment for your own organization. All that is nice and dandy, but that doesn't mean that you're going to remove the human being. So ultimate approval still goes back to the human being, and that is what we're really seeing, because the risk tied with accepting a AI informed risk closure is too high for us as for our responsibility, but also as companies. So that's why the human accountability part comes in. So I'm going to, just before the demo, I would like to say the feature of ERM using AI. Guess what? You need to have that strong data foundation. A lot of people might say, it's not about data, or you don't need that information. AI is like providing that, or you get some of the synthetic data already available. You can already provide guidance and information around it. I beg to differ. I definitely beg to differ. I believe that the rich source of data that your organization has created, and it keeps it close to its chest, it should still be as such, and that is your foundation towards your organizational advantage. And I want to say that the companies that are in the know, they don't share their information on these models either. So when you have that data foundation, then you're actually ensuring that you need to have the workflows. And a lot of times we tend to have called dangling endpoints. You don't want to have dangling endpoints where it just starts and initiates and stops there, and it just keeps on accumulating this information with nowhere to go or no other thing that is happening, and ultimately ends up in a analytics dashboard. As opposed to that, you want to start creating insights tied to that, and that's where the strong data, strong workflow, and your AI models and methods via agentic as well as generative AI really comes into play, as well as RAG. So once you've actually done that, then those outcomes are stored within your own applications ecosystem, as opposed to your own say another AI model itself, but rather stored within your own enterprise ecosystem. And I'll just show you how you can actually do that. And then finally, the area of human approval. It has to be paramount. We cannot get out of that ever, and because at the end of the day, it's the human being that is most affected. Okay, you can have a decision, and you can make trillion-dollar investments, all good, really great, and but that accountability of that last line where you're actually that decision really comes back to you, because there's the idea of what you feel, your direction, your objective, and your gut feeling. All of these really have its impact on our decision making on a day-to-day basis, and that is not lost, or that is not gone ever. Okay, so we are still at the center, and finally the next slide, and that is empower your enterprise, identify risks, resolve non-compliance, and drive seamless innovation. All right, so let's do a quick demo here, guys, on what I was actually really trying to do, and really trying to connect the dots here. So this is our overall product itself. When you actually log in, so this is the Enterprise Risk Management module. There's a bunch of other modules over here, like PRM, compliance, third-party risk management, regulatory audit, contract, and admin module that provides the admin features. But what we're saying is that you need to have that common platform where that data, your total data, that's your approved risk, recently added resolutions per month, your risk that you're monitoring, your current risk, or your identified risk, you want to like have all of that visible, available, and see all the data and everything. So this is that data we're saying, hey, you know what? You need to have that risk platform prior to actually making any decision. So this is that risk platform, and this is your risk register that contains your unique ID, title, owner, assignee, monitored by, your actions that you're actually taking around it. All of that information is actually available, and you should still be able to like enter your risk into your registry where you can save items, and you can upload documents, you can add controls tied with your individual risk. So that does not change. Your risk approval queue for different systems, it should still be there. Your risk register, as I mentioned, you should still be able to add work in that area, upload documents, have risk controls, understand your inherent and residual risk. None of these things really go away when you're bringing AI. And so does, as I said, your risk prioritization, your minor, moderate, major, critical risk, all of these things that you visualize or see, and maybe just really realize these things. None of these efforts or activities really go away. But what we're saying is that we're trying to add that other layer. And again, this is also risk reporting where you're able to ingest and collect all the data. So none of those things really go away. Even the risk closure, we're saying that it has to have those 3 I's. So it's actually the person who actually wrote that risk, the person who actually reviewed it, and the person who actually approved it. All of those individuals really take part in closing a risk. But this is where that AI risk assistant comes in, where you can identify a new risk. You can say, let's go to a particular risk industry. Something that that happened today are let's just say manufacturing, manufacture of food product. Let's call it a framework environmental, and we can call it like heat, heat, and then there's wildfire. So these are like those common things. Say for a manufacturing plant, that's actually, wildfire in British Columbia. British Columbia has a lot of wildfires right now. I know a lot of these things are also happening in Europe, but the ones that I'm very familiar, and it's actually over there. So you can now, what we're trying to do is we look at the industry sector, the division, and the industry areas, and we're trying to say, okay, let's aggregate the risks that we're actually facing. And this is where you're actually identifying new risk and actually getting recommendations out of it. So it's going to like query our internal database, it's querying the external areas, and because this is a net new item, it'll probably take its time towards identifying the new risk. But while it's identifying the new risk, we can always go over here and also say that there's also the areas of discover risk resolution. So any of these risks that's actually happening, you can actually resolve them via technical risk deficiency. You can actually select a particular risk item, and you can actually look at this was success. So risk search successfully. So you go over there, and here's your top risk that you've identified, and this is within the identified risk. So environmental risks, so wildfire and extreme heat disrupting food manufacturing operations in BC as a food products manufacturer operating in our sourcing firm. So you can just like look at it And if we just accept it, then you have this information, and you can like keep on looking at it. And the likelihood of these issues, so manufacturing environmental risk, heat, so geopolitical supply chain disruption affecting good food grade raw material sourcing. So a lot of these information. So here you are, as I said, like if you're a food producer in British Columbia, which I'm assuming none of you are, but this will really be very top of your mind because there's wildfire. How is it really affecting? So you can actually accept any of these risk scores. This look like the highest one. And again, by checking this, you're actually creating a new risk. So now you've actually created, so now as you notice, we identified a risk for a particular industry or an area that is new to us, and we're trying to like say build say a manufacturing plant in BC. So we identify that risk, and this risk resolution is, let's just say it's not applicable, you don't know. You can add a risk owner, you can add monitored by, and again likely, etc., and potential damage costs you can all add later. Now this becomes a risk item that you've actually saved, but the very fact that you've actually saved this risk does not necessarily mean that it's going to become a risk, and it actually goes into your risk entry. So this is that risk entry. You can go to the risk entry and say, you know what, save and risk approval. So it goes into your risk approval queue, and as a auditor or manager, you can actually approve this risk. Once you actually approve this risk, then it gets into your risk register. So again, while AI is identifying successfully a risk item for a manufacturing sector or manufacturing plant in BC, which I have no clue about, guess what? It's being added to the risk register because I actually, at the end of the day, approved it. And as soon as you approved it, you get the unique ID. And then you can start, adding information, start the timer, add start information. You can start uploading documentations against, or you can, add risk controls like one by one. You can add the risk controls and it'll all be populating over here. But now that you've actually have some form of idea about, identifying a new risk, you can also like do a risk resolution saying that, hey, you know what, this is that action item you have, but I don't have any risk resolution for it. So can you actually find some risk resolution for me? And you can actually search for risk resolution, and it's also going to take us time. But during this time of like doing risk resolution, and this is that part that we're saying is that it shouldn't be like, oh, let me enter a particular sentence and try to understand what's going on with regards to resolution, but rather it's the system that actually says that here's the option that you have. Do you want to accept it? Or maybe I know specifically, very, very well, exactly how this risk needs to be resolved, and it actually accepts this risk. And that's why I said all the keywords, all the the documentation, compliance, etc., history, the auditor already knows it. And then you have all these areas. And again, you're accepting this resolution. So all what it's saying is establish multi-source supply chain agreements for raw materials, operations team to identify and secure contracts, then at least 2 to 3 alternative suppliers outside of British Columbia within 90 days, action including mapping. So we're just going to accept this. And this is that entire item that we're accepting it. And as soon as you accept it and save this risk item, guess what? It gets added into your log. So you're also logging this, and you can also like download this log, and it logs like downloaded as a CSV file. And the good part of this, you can also like start sharing actual risk items here. To your colleagues, etc. So if you just go to the risk register now, you'll see that this item has been worked on, this item has been added, and you can just like get this link, and anybody who's actually involved in this, you can actually share that with that individual. So now that brings me to risk resolution. So you've identified the risk, you've discussed the risk resolution. Let's actually build in the control. And I think this is the one that we're working on. This is the BCS food production. So you can now come over here and say, you know what? These are the control views and values that I have. But you know what? I know that I don't have any controls established right now. So please find for me actual controls. So resolution is one thing, but I want to have actual control so that way these things don't happen to me again and again, and we can actually start executing against these controls. So it's going to find those controls for me, and while it's finding those controls, as you realize, a lot of these controls you can actually like build with AI. But again, you should not. There's always that human factor. I believe that we should always bring in the human. So as I say, that here's like some multiple controls, and then start adding those controls. And when I say adding those controls means as soon as you add it, submit it, then guess what? It becomes a control that you need to like start monitoring and utilizing against this particular risk item. So if we go back to our risk register, I believe, and you see this wildfire, and you click over here, and you see the risk control, and you'll see this particular risk control that's been added. And based on this risk control, you can say, hey, you know what? Establish and maintain contractual agreements and can be activated. And pathways through suppliers in Alberta, Ontario, and the U.S. Pacific Northwest. So if you're not within Canada, not familiar with the west coast of Canada, so it's really talking about Alberta, Ontario, actually pushing as the supply chain, expanding the supply chain, and also U.S. Pacific Northwest. So north and west, that's kind of like Alaska, that area where you have another supply chain. So it's saying that how do we support British Columbia? It's like from the east as well as from the northwest, you're providing this supply chain and updating that supply chain. And from here, you can update the inherent risk, etc. So that brings me to this last piece, that is the RCSA. I believe the RCSA, this actually changes your root cause system analysis, and this is that area. Sorry, this is the risk control self-assessment that actually self-assesses where you are. You can actually change your views, but we did not change any controls, because the controls for your risk appetite and risk tolerance, that is inherently a human approach. So what you're tolerant, like it's the heat. I mean, suppose you said that there's a fire. The fire is dangerous. It's dangerous for the human being, not necessarily for another, synthetic entity. So that's where the risk control self-analysis is really a human-tied approach, where this is my tolerance, this is my appetite, and I want to like execute on this, and that's really tied to the human being itself. So you can also start doing risk root cause analysis, and I'll probably just end it over here. I've already gone over 7 minutes, so I want to like have some question period for you guys also, so that way we can share some experience from all of us. So now we've looked at this unique ID. We can share it. We've got this environmental risk that we've identified. We've got the risk title. We've got a control name tied to it. We've also have the resolution tied to that. Now we're really looking at, hey, how do we really bring out, maybe some root cause analysis, so that way that's the analysis work that we can actually keep on going and looking at it on an ongoing basis. So this area is actually slowly populating. And I wonder if this is something. Okay, so corrective actions, immediate active protocol. So yeah, okay, this is successful. So we selected it. So root cause analysis and the kappa. So it slowly populated this information. To all the audience, I want to say that the root cause analysis, as you notice, you're not having to do like 10 different systems or 10 different workflows, trying to build things by yourself. It's already there. And, all the analysis that we just like mentioned about in our PowerPoint is already there. and this is the strategy and risk relationship, and then finally your ask area where you can actually start asking your questions and answers. But this is what we've actually developed as part of our Sys Risk Platform's Enterprise Risk Management Modules AI capability.